My name is Nadine Corbett. I am 66 years old. The message from my daughter arrived just after sunrise. A short line that looked more like an accidental tap than an invitation. Dinner tonight, 6:30. Harbor and hearth. No greeting. No signature. No explanation for the 4 months of silence. Though I guessed she might be testing if I still cared, I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Leela had never been good with words, but she had been good at disappearing. And I had learned the shape of that absence by now. Still, I replied that I would be there. It felt like something a mother should do, even if she no longer knew whether she was still wanted. I spent most of the afternoon trying not to overthink what to wear. My hands have never shaken so much from choosing a simple blouse, but aging has a way of making small decisions feel heavy. In the mirror, I saw the fine lines around my mouth and the silver strands I stopped dyeing last winter. I looked like someone who had outlived disappointment more than once. When I finally stepped outside, the November air was sharper than it looked. The drive from my quiet street in South Portland into the Old Port District felt longer than usual. Though I knew every turn, I remembered driving this same route when Lila was a child. Back when she used to chatter in the back seat about school projects and birthday parties. Those drives felt full. Now the silence only pressed harder against my chest. I parked a block from the restaurant, smoothing the front of my coat before walking the rest of the way. Harbor and hearth sign glowed above the entrance. Warm and polished, I felt a small lift in my chest. A flicker of hope that still survived in spite of everything. But the moment I stepped inside, something shifted. The hostess barely glanced at me before asking, "Are you with the Corbett party?" Her tone was polite enough, but there was a tightness there. Something strained. She led me toward a corner table, and with each step, the air around the room felt heavier, as if the evening had already decided what it wanted to be. Lila did not stand to greet me. She did not smile. She only reached for a glass. Lila did not rise when I reached the table. She simply picked up a plain water glass from the side and slid it toward my place setting. The sound of it moving across the wood was sharper than it needed to be. "Here," she said, eyes on the stem of her own wine glass rather than my face. "This is fine for you." Across from her, Margaret, my former in-law by marriage but still very present in Lila's life, cracked open a lobster claw with perfect confidence. Butter dripped down her fork as she gave me one quick, assessing glance before returning to her plate. As if my arrival had changed nothing at all, I sat down slowly. "Thank you," I said, because I could not think of anything else that would not make things worse. Greg, Lila's husband, leaned back in his chair. He barely acknowledged me before saying, "We already ordered. It's a special night for the family, so we kept it simple." "I see," I replied. Theo, my 14-year-old grandson, glanced between us. He had arrived only a few minutes earlier and was still shrugging out of his jacket. "Grandma, did you want something to eat?" "I think the menu," Lila cut him off. "Theo, she is fine. She knows how this works." Theo's brow knit, but he did not argue. He looked at me instead, confusion written across his face, as if pieces of the rules at this table were just clicking into place. A server approached, young, nervous, holding a small notepad. "Can I get you anything to drink?" "Ma'am, sparkling water." Perhaps Lila lifted a hand without looking up. "Tap water is fine. Regular glass." The server hesitated. Her eyes flicked to mine. She understood enough to know something was wrong. "It's fine," I said quietly. "Tap water is fine." She nodded and moved away. Greg reached for another roll. We try to make sure big celebrations stay focused. Too many distractions ruin the mood. "Distractions," Margaret echoed, wiping her fingertips with a linen napkin. "Everyone has to know their place." Lila finally looked at me. Her expression edged and crisp. "I don't feed extras." Mom, tonight is about the kids. We are not making this complicated. The words landed so fast I almost did not feel them at first. Then something clenched in my chest, a hard pull beneath my ribs. Still, I kept my voice steady. I understand. I said. Theo's face tightened. He picked at the corner of his napkin. Shoulders drawn in, I placed a hand on his arm under the table, just enough pressure to tell him I was all right, even if I was not. I lifted the water glass, though my hand trembled faintly, and took a slow sip. Lila kept her eyes on her plate. But her voice carried the same practiced sharpness I had heard for years. It struck something older in me, something I had tried not to examine too closely. When she was 13, she stood in the doorway of our small duplex, arms crossed, watching her classmate's mother pull up in a glossy car. "Do you always have to park out front?" she whispered, cheeks burning. "People can see where we live." See. I had been tying my work shoes, getting ready for the night shift at the motel laundry. "This is our home," I said. "There's nothing wrong with it." She did not argue. She just turned away, shoulders stiff, as if the walls themselves embarrassed her. Years later, after my husband died and I was left with 2 jobs and a stack of bills, Margaret stepped into Lila's life with the kind of confidence money buys. She invited Lila to dinners, trips, weekend outings. She should know what real opportunity looks like. Margaret told me once, her tone gentle, her meaning not. Lila absorbed it all: the clothes, the posture, the rules, spoken and unspoken. She learned fast that some people, like Margaret and her world, were meant to be admired, and others, like me, were expected to stay quiet. One evening, when Lila was 16, she came home from Margaret's house glowing with excitement about their weekend in Bar Harbor. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table. "I wish you would try harder," she said suddenly. "Just be more like them." I had looked up from the towels, unsure how to answer. "I am trying," I said. She sighed, disappointed, and walked away. Now, at this table, hearing her speak to me the same way she did then, I felt the old pattern settle around us again. Margaret smiled across the table without lifting her eyes, as if she knew exactly how much space she had taken in my daughter's life. Lila lifted her wine glass again, talking to Margaret about internships and summer plans. But the sound faded at the edges. My attention drifted toward the kitchen doors, where the staff moved with a rhythm I recognized in my bones. I had not stepped foot inside Harbor and Hearth in years. Yet everything felt familiar in a way that tightened my throat. 20 years earlier, the restaurant had been nothing more than an empty space with peeling paint and an owner desperate to keep the lights on. I had just lost my brother, Daniel, to a sudden stroke. The life insurance payout came to a little more than $200,000. And the check sat on my kitchen table for weeks. I kept tracing his name on the paperwork, trying to understand the finality of it. One evening, the original owner, a friend of Daniel's, called me in tears. "I cannot pay my staff next month. I will have to close." His voice cracked, and something inside me broke with it. I signed the investment papers the next morning. "Use it," I told him. "Make the place what you always dreamed it could be." He tried to argue. I did not let him. The restaurant grew slowly, unevenly, but it grew. When the owner retired 5 years later, he handed me his remaining shares. "You kept us alive," he said. "You should decide what becomes of this place." I became a silent partner out of instinct, because Lila had always measured herself against the worlds Margaret introduced, and knowing her mother had quietly built success would widen the gap she already resented. She already compared us to Margaret's world. My name on a successful business would only widen the distance. I stayed out of sight, but the staff did not forget. Marco Rivera, the then sous chef, shook my hand on my last day working the books. "You saved us," he had said quietly. Now, across the dining room, I saw Marco emerge from the kitchen. His eyes found mine in a single glance, and recognition settled over his face like a certainty he had been waiting on. I straightened slightly in my seat. For the first time that night, the ground beneath me did not feel so uneven. Greg tapped the stem of his wineglass twice, a signal I had seen him use before. The table quieted around him as if on command. "Let us stay focused," he said. "Tonight is for Lila and the twins. They worked hard, and moments like this matter." Lila straightened immediately, waiting for his approval the way someone waits for sunlight, as she had done for years, conditioned to follow their cues before speaking. "Exactly," she said. "Some people do not understand how much discipline it takes to achieve anything worth celebrating." Her eyes flicked to me, quick and sharp. Margaret dabbed the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "Success has a language," she murmured. "Not everyone grows up speaking it. That is no one's fault, of course." She smiled at me without showing her teeth. I kept my hands folded in my lap. "I am glad the girls are doing well," I said. "That is what matters." Greg exhaled through his nose. "You always simplify things. Accomplishments deserve structure, standards, presentation." Theo shifted in his seat, looking from one adult to another. "Grandma likes celebrating things too," he said quietly. Lila's mouth tightened. "Theo, please, do not insert yourself." He leaned back but did not lower his eyes. He had grown taller this past year, long enough in the limbs to look older when he stayed still. Now, he watched the table like he understood more than he was meant to. Margaret reached for another lobster claw. Children learn best when the adults around them model proper behavior. Greg nodded. "Exactly. And that means not letting emotions take over. We set expectations. Everyone follows." Lila glanced at him with pride, as if she had earned that line. I took a sip of my water, the coolness settling against the inside of my cheeks. "I am following," I said softly. Lila let out a small laugh. "Good. We do not need surprises tonight." Across the table, Theo's fingers pressed into the fabric of his napkin. His shoulders drew in, the way they did when he sensed something unfair but had no power to change it. He looked at me again. This time, he did not try to speak. He did not need to. The tension had already found him. The server returned with a tray of wine glasses. Her hands steady, but her eyes uncertain. She set the crystal in front of Lila, Greg, and Margaret, then paused before reaching my place. Only the plain water waited there. She hesitated, glancing at the untouched glass as if hoping for permission to change something. "It is all right." I told her, "Thank you." She nodded quickly. But the apology in her expression lingered. She had seen enough to understand the imbalance at the table. As she walked away, Greg resumed speaking as though nothing had happened. "Discipline is not optional in families like ours," he said. "We maintain a standard." Margaret lifted her chin. "And we do not apologize for expecting others to rise to it." Lila tapped her fork softly on the edge of her plate. "Mom never understood that part." My fingers tightened around the water glass, but I kept my voice level. "I understand perfectly." She shrugged. "Then act like it." Before I could answer, the kitchen doors opened. Marco stepped out, scanning the room as if looking for someone specific. His eyes found mine. He had been briefed on our history, and the recognition was immediate. Not surprise, certainty. The same certainty I had seen years earlier when he signed his first contract under the new ownership. Lila noticed his gaze. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Marco did not answer her. Instead, he gave me a small nod, the kind that carried weight when shared between people who remembered the same history. Something in my chest loosened. Not relief exactly, but steadiness. Greg leaned toward me. If there is an issue with the service, you should tell the staff, not make a scene with your expressions. I am not making a scene, I said. He scoffed. Then try to keep up, Lila added, almost gently. Do not complicate things tonight. I lifted the water glass. Meeting her eyes with the calm I had fought to maintain, noted, the word left my mouth without heat. Without fear, only clarity. It felt different this time, as if something settled into place inside me. Something I had put down long ago. Across the room, Marco was still watching. The shift had already begun. Chapter 7. When the chef stepped forward. The kitchen doors swung open again, and this time Marco did not stop to speak with a server or check a station. He walked straight toward our table with the certainty of someone who had already made a decision. Lila noticed him first. Great, she muttered, smoothing her hair. Now, there is a problem. Marco stopped beside me. Ms. Corbett, he said quietly, may I have a moment with you? Lila's head jerked up. Why are you speaking to her if she complained about something? I will handle it. This is my reservation. Marco kept his eyes on me. There is no complaint. Greg's voice dropped into warning. Sir, we are having a family dinner. If there is an issue, bring it to me. Marco did not respond to him. It would be a privilege to speak with you, he said to me, his tone respectful in a way that shifted the air around the table. Lila let out a breath. Mom, what did you do? Nothing, I said. A couple at the next table had already turned their heads. Another whispered behind a menu. It was small, but noticeable, the beginning of something neither Greg nor Lila understood. Margaret narrowed her eyes. Why on earth would the head chef need a word with her? Marco answered calmly. Out of respect. The room seemed to still for a moment. Lila leaned forward, her voice tight. Respect for what Marco did not answer her. He simply waited for me to stand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Marco led me only a few steps from the table before stopping. He kept his voice low, but clear enough for anyone listening. Ms. Corbett, I want to acknowledge your presence properly. Lila stood abruptly. Why are you talking to her like that? She is making this whole dinner uncomfortable. Marco turned back toward the table, his posture straightening. I am speaking to her with respect, he said, then, without hesitation. He added, she is one of the founding investors of Harbor and Hearth, and she remains the majority owner. The words hit the air like a dropped tray. The nearest servers stopped mid-motion. One adjusted her apron and stood taller. Another quickly set down a tray and approached with a fresh glass of sparkling water, real glassware, not the plain tumbler in front of me. Greg's fork slipped from his hand. What are you talking about? He demanded. Marco faced him calmly. Ms. Corbett kept this restaurant alive 20 years ago. Without her investment, none of this would exist. Margaret blinked hard, her confidence cracking. That cannot be right. We would have known. Lila shook her head as if trying to force sense back into the room. Mom, you own this place. I met her eyes. Yes. Whispers rose around us, small, sharp threads of recognition. That is the owner. She has been here the whole time. Marco's timing was deliberate. He chose the moment when her dismissal could no longer obscure the truth. I heard she saved the business. Lila's shoulders curled inward, her earlier certainty falling away. Greg looked at me with a mix of confusion and something closer to fear. Marco nodded once, as if confirming what everyone else was only beginning to understand. Ms. Corbett built this place from the ground up. The truth settled between us. Heavy and undeniable. I walked back to the table without waiting for anyone to regain their composure. The server with the trembling hands approached immediately, now standing straighter than before. Miss Corbett, she said, may I bring you something from the chef's list? Yes, I replied. I will have the halibut entree, and my grandson will have the lobster platter with truffle butter. Serve it with proper glassware. Theo's eyes widened. Grandma, it is all right. I told him. Enjoy your dinner. Marco murmured instructions to the staff. And within moments, a crystal glass replaced the plain tumbler at my place. Lila watched silently, fingers digging into the edge of her napkin. When the bill arrived, I lifted it before Greg's hand could reach. The folder was heavy, the way expensive meals tend to be. I set it in front of Lila. This was your celebration. I said quietly, host's pay. Her breath hitched. Mom, please, I did not mean I was trying to. She swallowed hard. I am sorry. The words trembled. But not from understanding, only from exposure. I nodded once. Not unkind, but not forgiving either. Take care of it. Lila, Theo's plate arrived then, steaming and rich. He looked at me uncertainly, waiting for permission. Eat, I said. He picked up his fork. I reached for mine. The room around us had changed, but I had not rushed to follow. I stayed steady, and I stayed seated on my own terms. Theo held the door for me as we stepped out of the restaurant. The night air felt cool against my skin, steadying in a way the evening had not been. We walked to the car without speaking, the weight of everything settling into a quiet. Neither of us rushed to break. Once we were on the road, the lights along the waterfront flickered across the windshield. Theo sat forward, hands folded loosely in his lap. Grandma, he said softly, I am proud of you. The words reached somewhere deep in me. Thank you, I answered. I did what needed to be done. He nodded, still watching me. You did not yell. You did not break. You just stood up. I let out a slow breath. It took me many years to understand I was allowed to. We drove past the harbor, the water catching the street lamps in small, bright shards. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unclench inside me. I did not need Lila's approval to feel whole. I did not need her understanding to move forward. After all that happened tonight, I think I will step in tomorrow not to dominate, but to ensure the restaurant's legacy is respected and to plan a small training program for single mothers who need a place to start. Theo smiled. That sounds like you. I reached over and squeezed his hand. It is time I choose where I stand. He squeezed back. You already did. We turned onto my street, the tires humming softly beneath us. For once, I did not brace for the next hurt. I simply drove home. Steady and certain, the night open ahead of us,